for discussion. So welcome, and thank you to Fenland for providing the facility. If I could ask anyone who's got their mobile phone to turn it to silent or vibrate. There are no fire drills here. If the alarm signals, it's not terribly well signposted, but we go out the back door, we turn left, and we immediately get the shortest exit by going left again. So should we need to leave the building, that is the route. And I think Tamar will be going first, just about. So, so should we need to leave? And yes, I just remind you all that the meeting is being recorded and broadcast. Would you like Tamar to advise if any people are absent or have given apologies?
We've received apologies from Councillor Steve Allen and Councillor Ambrose Smith and Councillor Alison Whelan.
Thank you. Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary or non-statutory disclosable interest in any of the items? No. If you should feel the need to disclose an interest, you can during the meeting. So, thank you. So we've recorded the apologies and the declarations. Have people had a look at the minutes from the last meeting of the 21st of June? Are there any issues that people want to raise on those? Councillor Bailey.
Sorry, just going back to the last item, declaration of interest, just in the interest of transparency, it is on my register, but I'm a trustee of East Cambridgeshire Community Land Trust.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. Any points on the minutes? Are you happy if I sign them as a true record? Okay, thank you. So I'll sign those in a minute. So the next item is the action log. Are there any issues people want to raise on page 13 or 14? No, thank you. There are no public questions, so I move on to the agenda plan, item 1.4. Is there anything there? People, we've got, I mean, effectively, I think we're seeing the November meeting as the last opportunity to raise any projects that might be potentially startable by the March deadline. So if people take an interest in a particular project, and we may come on to some of the projects that are already in the agreed pipeline, then we'll come on to it. So there's been considerable efforts by officers in requesting a response from MHCLG. So we appreciate some of the challenges the civil servants have had in considering this. And we were very grateful to hear on Friday that they had confirmed not all of what we might want, but £18.7 million out of the 45 million that had not been paid for the 5-year programme that they had committed to. So I don't think we, as happens in these, we don't know the small print yet. So all we've had is the letter from Luke Hall, and we would expect there to be both clarification, some of which Roger and Asma may be able to give today, but that there will be further clarification. So that will be dealt with under item 3.2. So I just update you there. So in the absence of that, is there anything on the agenda plan? No, so we can take that as agreed. And I then move on to report 2.1, which I presume, Roger, you will introduce, which is the policy closure and the follow-up, because some of the projects have still proceeded on the 100k homes. So if I could ask Roger Thompson to introduce item 2.1.
Thank you, Chair. So report item 2.1 is in connection with the 100k homes policy that the Combined Authority has and the proposed closure of that policy. The background to this is that the 100k homes policy with the Combined Authority was effectively approved through the Combined Authority Board in January 2020, and then in September 2020 the Housing and Communities Committee adopted the 100k homes allocation policy. We've obviously had a change more recently to the national planning policy, where first homes have now been introduced through the national planning policy framework. And when you look at the detail of the first homes policy, as hopefully you've seen in the report or members are already aware of, it is very similar in its nature to the 100k homes policy. It's obviously a national policy, so it's going to be brought in, effectively sort of being worked through to December time. So the question there is, if we have a national policy with first homes, do we need the 100k homes policy specifically with the Combined Authority? The other more sort of practical issue that we have is that connected to the announcement of the funding from MHCLG, they have also stipulated as part of our programme for 21-22 that our arrangements for offering loans to local SME developers in return for them delivering elements of 100k homes on their schemes is something that we cannot now proceed with into the future, because MHCLG have said they don't want us using housing monies for future loans. They want us to sink that money into the grant programme, and that is indeed what's been proposed and approved in the letter that we received on Friday. So if we retain the 100k homes policy, but also a very practical issue of, well, how are we going to deliver them? Because other than through the goodwill of developers and through the planning process, which is already now covered through first homes policy, there seems to be no other route for us to deliver 100k homes. We had a large number of people obviously who expressed an interest in 100k homes, and clearly there needs to be, as said in the recommendations, a communication to them about the change of emphasis that the Combined Authority is proposing. And I think on that note, Chair, I'll end the introduction.
So thank you, Mr. Thompson. So we've got the report in front of us, but people may want to ask a question. So perhaps we focus on questions, but then we can take comments. Any questions initially or comments? No? D. Laws, Councillor Laws.
I just think it's disappointing, especially in this area. Many developers have looked at 100k homes. We've promoted it, and it's come as a great disappointment, I've got to say.
Okay. Councillor Nessing and Councillor Bailey.
I'd just like to say that I'm not actually all that disappointed. I've never been a fan of the 100k homes policy. I think it has always given an absolutely enormous amount of subsidy to a very small number of people. So I'm actually I understand why government have not been supportive of this scheme, and I'm quite relieved to see that we are not proceeding with it. I think that there are much better ways to use this money to support people who are in the most need of housing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailey, and I know that you've also taken over one of the projects.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not aware that there's been any indication that government doesn't support this scheme at all, as Councillor Nessing has just said. In fact, I think the government's embraced the principles of 100k homes, which were presented to MHCLG by this authority. And they've taken on those principles and written them into a national policy that has changed the national planning policy framework. So I think they very much endorsed the principles of 100k homes and are rolling them out across the country. But of course, it will take time for first homes to come forward, because any sites that already have planning permission will not be required to deliver 100 first homes on their sites. And I think any sites that are in advanced pre-application talks won't be required to either. So it will take some time to start seeing first homes come to reality. I think there's been a total misrepresentation of the costs of 100k homes and misrepresentation of the delivery schedule, because much has been made of the fact that they, only X number of houses have come forward on 100k homes at X price per property, with ridiculous discussions about £1 million per home, which is just complete misrepresentation of what's been going on. Of course, they don't cost £1 million per home. And, it was only a principle that was latterly adopted in the previous administration. So, of course, it's taking time to bring sites forward. I think it's a shame, really. I'm very pleased that the government has brought forward first homes and has adopted the principles. I think it's a good job for Cambridge and Peterborough, because I don't think the current mayor has any ambitions to offer people who aspire to own their own home opportunity to do so. There seems to be more flexibility coming later in the later paper on the future affordable housing scheme, but about different tenures. But this is a discounted home. It is hugely popular product where people can own 100% of the home, and it lasts in perpetuity because the discount is passed on to future homeowners. So I'm pleased that the government's bringing it forward through the first homes policy, but as I say, it will take time for that to be realised. And I think affordable home ownership is a critically important part of the tenure mix, and I'm sorry that the mayor doesn't seem to support that aspiration. East Cambs has adopted its own allocation policy for 100k homes, so we will continue to deliver 100k homes in East Cambridgeshire. We've got the first 800k homes in Fordham, as outlined in the paper. It's taken time for the lenders, for mortgage lenders, to get to grips with the product, but they are now doing so, and people have got offers, and we hope to welcome people into those new homes in Fordham very soon. What was clear is that even with a local allocations policy, there was a huge need for this product and a huge desire by people and therefore I think it's an important part of the tenure mix. It's only one part, but it's an important part. We've adopted our own allocations policy in East Cambridgeshire. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be inviting expressions of interest for the Alexander House development in Ely, and then the former Paradise Pools site, where we've secured 100k homes via Section 106 contributions. I just wanted to point out, I think there's an error in the second recommendation, which says communicate with all those who've registered an interest on the first home scheme and advise of the affordable housing. I don't think that's what's meant. I think that means it's meant to read the 100k home scheme. And I would ask that anybody in East Cambridgeshire, that has shown interest on there, is advised that we do still have an allocations policy in East Cambridgeshire, and that we should keep in touch, because we are still looking to deliver these. There will be some lag before first homes comes forward, and I think there is the opportunity where in Fordham, for example, we've worked with a very willing, forward-thinking developer who is delivering the 8 homes at Fordham at nil cost to the taxpayer and no soft lending, just as part of its affordable housing mix. And I think there are opportunities to continue that. And that's why we will still be hoping to work with developers in East Cambridgeshire and continue to offer the 100k homes until, such time as first homes policy gets going. So I think it's hugely regrettable that the mayor doesn't support affordable home ownership, and we do in East Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Councillor Batchelor, and then Councillor Fuller, and then I'll contribute.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. Just a report that the 400k houses in South Cambs have already been converted to first homes. So that process is already underway. The world moves on, doesn't it? And there is a real substantial difference between the first homes project and this 100k. And it's precisely that, the 100k, a fixed amount of money, which simply doesn't work or didn't work across the entire county, given the different costs of land and building. So we have first homes now. I would say that they're not welcome with open arms by any means, given that the government is now asking for a 25% allocation to first homes, which is on top of shared ownership, which they're also promoting, which means that there's huge pressure on rented accommodation in that we can only now give something in the order of 50% of a 106 arrangement for rental properties. So it's not all good news by any means, but we have to work within the constraints that we're given. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Like a couple of the previous speakers, I'm not necessarily really disappointed to see this policy go. I've raised issues, concerns with it ever since its inception. But the principle was right. And that's where I agree with Councillor Bailey. And I think it's regrettable that we're talking about getting rid of this and there's nothing in the pipeline to come forward and replace it beyond relying on the government scheme of first homes. And I understand the rationale for saying that, but the reason this combined authority was originally created was to go above and beyond what the government's already doing. And I think it's regrettable that we find ourselves in a position where we effectively say, well, the government have come up with a new policy, therefore we don't need to take any action locally for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And it's part of an emerging pattern that concerns me around this lack of ambition, this lack of aspiration of how we can do more. And I won't dwell on it because it's not the remit of this committee, but we've gone from talking about a world-class transport system, for example, to more buses. We're now saying, actually, we don't, as a combined authority, want to do anything in this space of low-cost home ownership because the government's sorting it out. If we go too far down that route, I think there's going to be more and more questions around the purpose of having a combined authority, because we're not just here to oversee mediocrity. We're actually supposed to be going above and beyond what the government are already delivering for our county. As I say, that's the very reason we were set up. So I think, as I said, I think it's very regrettable, as Councillor Bailey said, that we now have a mayor that has no interest in encouraging low-cost home ownership for people, because that's an aspiration that's shared by a great deal of our residents across the entire county. And I think it's unfortunate that we're getting rid of a policy that at least went some way towards trying to meet that aspiration without talking about anything that might be coming in down the line to replace it, because I sense there is nothing other than government first home policies.
Well, my two pennyworth. I really don't want to dredge into the depths of what's happened in the last 4 years, but I do think that those councillors who've been involved in the combined authority, and I'm now getting a bit old in a way, in that I'm now the only leader that was there when we were involved in the original devolution deal. However we want to characterise it, we lost our way on affordable housing, and the government blocked £45 million of funding. And part of the reason was that they felt that we had lost our way in focusing on delivery. I do not accept and he's not here to speak for himself, but I do not accept the characterisation that Mayor Nick Johnson is not interested in affordable ownership, because first of all, we will get an update. We have to focus on the delivery that we've got the money for. And until we evidence and re-win the confidence of MHCLG, there will be no affordable housing funding from the end of next March. It is clear, despite what maybe have been said, that government was deeply unhappy, MHCLG were deeply unhappy that money was taken out of the core affordable housing fund for generating hundreds of low-cost affordable ownership product, as well as low-cost affordable rent, without even asking whether they thought it was a good idea. And that was a central part of their intervention. And I don't think it's worth me digging into it, but we are committed, councillors, to low-cost affordable ownership. I have drawn my talons back in the wording of the proposed principles, and which are completely academic until we've actually got some dosh to actually use. So I take the point that it is regrettable, because in some ways there's some very good aspirations. Again, being long in the tooth, I remember Johnny Prescott wasn't exactly any better than any other person responsible for housing, because the last Labour government was average to say the best and relied on market delivery of affordable housing. But he and others have been committed to trying to get a product into the market that is actually a lot cheaper. So if there are opportunities to do it, we may do it. But as Roger Thompson rightly said, the government wasn't happy that, and has said as part of its agreement, which we will discuss later about exactly where we're going on funding, it wasn't happy that we loaned money, and that was one of the core routes to cement this. I am conscious and welcome the fact that district councils can make choices, and that Councillor Bailey and East Cambridgeshire will continue it, and we will happily assist in the communication. We can include a reference, Mr. Thompson, to the fact that East Cambridgeshire is offering to continue, and that within the wording of what we share with the several, well, a couple of thousand people who've expressed an interest. So we will share that. We will also correct, and thank you for the correction, the recommendation. And we will continue and there is a significant number of affordable housing product homes within the at least 500 homes that get moved forward by the £18.7 million that government has agreed. So we will look at affordable homes, but it is the case that people at the bottom of the heap in each part of our geography are the people that can't even afford to rent somewhere. So I hope that we can agree this, and I think this will also be going to the board as well. Is there any other comments that people want to make? And if obviously people are free to vote. So with the amendment that we substitute 100k homes in where first homes are, and on the basis that we'll also be communicating to people, given that 8 have been built and a significant number have been interested. I will put the recommendations to the meeting. Is there anyone wishing to propose and or second the recommendations? Councillor Batchelor's proposing a seconder. Councillor Nessinger. So I've put to the meeting the recommendations en bloc, the two of them with that amendment. All those in favour? And all those against? So I think that was 4, 5, 6 and 1 against. Correct. Okay. Well, thank you. And I also take that in the spirit that we are continuing to focus on home ownership as a combined authority as well. So thank you for that. And if we therefore move on to the next item, which is a document that I've put together. So if I introduce it, and again, I could speak for a long time. I quite like speaking on housing, but I appreciate that other people have got other things to do during the day, but I do encourage there to be debate. So I drafted some principles, and I really welcome the depth of thought that have been put into the responses. And I'm not trying to say that the discussion is over, which is why in the recommendations, I've actually said that this is work in progress. I don't think it's worth at this stage trying to nut out the detail, but I do think it's really valuable in our dialogue with MHCLG that we are expressing an aspiration to build. We're not in any way trying to alter the pipeline of schemes that has been submitted to MHCLG, although as we'll reference, we really want more money, 18.7 million, even in terms of what we're being able to spend until next March. It's not the limit of our hope and ambition. But in discussing the opportunity, to be perfectly blunt, we've got absolutely no commitment from government to there being further funding. We did have an interesting discussion with Sajid Javid, now Secretary of State for Health, which was a non-committal discussion at Alconbury back in 2018, that should we deliver on affordable housing, that there could be further funding. What we need to be quite clear to government on is that affordable housing remains a central priority, and quite apart from anything, whether we are able to achieve our GVA, we do need to be able to provide housing of all types. We need it for key workers. We need it in a very different housing market. So the housing market of Peterborough is very different from Fenland or Huntingdonshire. We have to recognise that we need different focus and interventions. We've not been able to intervene as well as we should in the south, and whilst we respect government and what they've done, their limit of 45 grand as a unit of intervention really is limiting in Huntingdonshire, South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City. So very briefly, the 8 principles you will see are a slightly reworded, but still a focus on looking to do better on affordable rent, partly if we're able to achieve a kind of formula and a funding arrangement which will assist the south of the county. I have got no problem with the fact that what we come to later is heavily investment into Peterborough and Fenland. I've got no problem with that. It's just the way that it's fallen, but to recognise that we are an additionality. So we've got to continue to develop the role, building on a really good team led by Roger and others. The fact that we've got this team, I think, is a really good argument to say to government, we shouldn't just be on a residual organisation enabling the existing programme, which Roger will confirm the totem of, but goes well beyond the 18.7 million that we're going to add to it. But it makes sense that we're in an additionality role, and that may point us into certain types of tenure or types of rental or ownership product, simply because it's where we could make a difference. So being realistic, there was a lot of detail. I mean, I was really impressed and genuinely by the depth of the responses. I haven't sought to, at this stage, incorporate it. People might say, oh, you've been lazy, but I don't think until we've got the prospect of there being some funding from government that it was right to take officer time away from just the existing immediate challenge. But we will come back. So yeah, the county council had a lot of thought about the links with care, and it said we weren't strong enough on climate change. Huntingdonshire and East Cambridgeshire and others came up with points that I'm not saying it isn't going to be part of it. It's just that I, in updating it, didn't feel that it was right that I wrote it all up, because if we don't manage to secure some more money, it would be quite limited if we're required then to look to bid to Homes England, and we don't want to end up competing with districts and other providers. There is a provision that if districts or developers want us to help them on the affordable housing percentage, or it could be on the order of delivery in the principle 4, I am aware that sometimes we really do need to rework some of the viability assessments with developers. There's no science in viability assessment, so a thread there, but there's no intention or wish to get involved in a project in any district unless the district supports that. Collaboration, again, there are quite good and established county-wide networks, but if we're to look at, say, the middle part of looking at unintentional homelessness and then potentials in the area of modular housing, it's just really to look at to see whether there's an opportunity. And whilst we are reviewing how we're delivering community land trust and other projects, and we're committed to continuing to do that, it will partly then reshape the skill base that we look for within the combined authority. And it has to be evidence and data driven. We continue to be committed to supporting community land trusts. We know that East Cambridgeshire have made an exceptional effort in that area. And the wording is there that we actively engage communities. We are not going to be always community led, but there has to be a feature of the community having a say. So there's some there's some measured wording in there about how it will be done, and we will continue to look at the resourcing in that area. And then we recognised, and I know we've got some input from John T. Hill's team, and they recognise that, and we know that irrespective of all of the other obstacles in the construction sector in our area, both pre-construction, before site, and also just there is now a growing and serious gap in construction skills in our zone. It's holding up development. So we're making a point of that along with modular, and you'll be glad to know that I've reached point 8, and that is just the whole zone of addressing climate change, net zero and biodiversity. And we link in there with the work that was done by the previous mayor in creating an independent commission. So this is not the end. This is simply in part just to seek your support for some principles and to move from there to come back. So there will be, before we, so how I see the order, and apologies for speaking longer, I kind of almost suggested I wasn't going to speak very long, and then I did, as some do. So the order of play as I see it is, first of all, we have the dialogue with MHCLG, and we see whether there's a significant prospect of winning some further funding. And I would like to be able to give you greater assurance than I can. And at the moment, there is no knowledge on that, but we will have that dialogue. And obviously to then link then with maybe other bids that Peterborough, particularly bold, for instance, at the moment on projects, to see what's there. So is there a prospect of money? And then subject to also what MHCLG as our very valued partner might say, where do we press their buttons, and then come back with a fuller strategy with your input. But there will be a continuing dialogue, and then at that stage also go out to the wider registered providers and the voluntary sector for their input, including on aspects like homelessness and modular housing aspects. So I welcomed officer input. As you can see from the attached, there were some truly high quality responses. Thank you for listening. Any input? Councillor Batchelor and then Councillor Fuller.
Right, thanks very much, Chair. I very much welcome this opening of the debate. I think it has quite a considerable way to go as yet. But from my district's point of view, if we are to play a full part in the combined authority, there has to be a fundamental change in the way that the grant funding is allocated. The idea of a £45,000 cap simply doesn't work for the Greater Cambridge, the city and ourselves. And we have to find some way of being much more flexible. This will be key as far as we're concerned. The lowest income is mentioned a couple of times. But I'm not quite sure what that precisely means, that we're trying to support those.
Apologies, which page are you on, Councillor?
Well, it's number one, isn't it?
Okay, yep. Thanks.
So number one says we're going to support those, or the priority will be those on the lowest income. We're certainly not doing that at the moment. The major projects that we have given permission to only just actually make the qualifying criteria to be called affordable, in that the rent is still at something of the order of 80% of market rates. So that certainly doesn't feed into those on the lowest income. I don't think there's much point at this stage going into a lot of detail, but I would say as a general principle that I personally would like to see any funding that we have devolved onto the individual districts. We have departments with huge experience in dealing with these matters, and we have the numbers to actually deal with these matters. So I think it would be much more effective if the money, should we ever get any more, should be devolved to each district and city. The city has already given an object lesson in the effectiveness of having a flexible approach to the funding and how you actually allocate it. And I would congratulate the city on delivering a huge program out of the 70 million that you've been given by government. And that should be an object lesson for us all, that I personally feel that that is the way that we should go forward. But I hope that we'll have much more debate on that in due time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Batchelor does a very good job of making the case for abolishing the combined authority, doesn't he? And simply devolving funding to our individual authorities, which some of us might not disagree with. But there you go. A debate for another day. I don't wish to come across as negative today, Chairman, because as you know, you and I tend to actually normally to agree quite a lot on housing matters. And I've listened to your proposed strategy and the rationale as to why you're doing it this way round. And I completely respect that. But I just don't think enough of the feedback from all of our constituent authorities has yet been incorporated into the 8 principles. And like you, I was really pleased to see the feedback from all the authorities, because we pretty much all said the same thing. And you know, again, I was very impressed with the County Council's contribution from a slightly different perspective to the housing authorities. And I think when you've got all of the authorities essentially saying largely the same things and questioning the same points and raising the same concerns and questions, we must listen to that. And I think this, again, is a phrase that's been used elsewhere, but this appears as though it's a case of we've been heard, but we haven't necessarily been listened to. And with that in mind, Chairman, you know, with some regret, I would suggest we actually don't approve the 8 principles today, because there's still some fundamental differences between, I think, what the housing authorities and the County Council are saying on this and the principles we're being asked to agree. And until those gaps are bridged, I'm not sure we can really agree these principles, because once we've agreed these principles, we're not realistically going to go back and revise them, because that's the point of having a principle. So I respect your strategy, Chairman, of wanting to go to MHCLG, and I think we can do that. So I think we can go ahead with the first 2 recommendations on the paper. but the 8 principles need a bit more work. And we've, as you know, they're on the agenda for this Wednesday's leader strategy meeting of the Combined Authority, which I think, and I appreciate the timing has probably caused this, but we probably should have had that debate before they came to Housing Committee, where we're being asked to agree them today. So with some regret, Chairman, for those reasons, I would actually propose that we do not support the 8 principles below.
Thank you. Councillor Nessinger and Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I welcome these principles as in broadly, and some in particular, and not just 1 and 2. So I would like us to take these forward today. The ones that I'm particularly keen that we should take forward. I mean, I think there's a lot of good in all of the principles. I think there's lots more work to be done on our housing policy over the next year. But certainly some of these I think we ought to be picking up straight away. And the 2 I'd particularly, well, so 1, obviously excellent, and I'm glad Ryan agrees on that one. But I think 4 and 8 are also really important that we get on with as quickly as possible. And I'm particularly going to talk about 4. I think that using the Combined Authorities capacity to help with earlier delivery and making greater affordable housing, a greater affordable housing percentage more achievable within planning through the viability mechanisms is really important. And the more we can do that, the better, and the quicker we can do that, the better, because so many of our of the schemes that come forward to districts have the amount of affordable housing watered down by those viability assessments. So the more that we can think about ways in which, and there are many ways in which the Combined Authority might be able to help and support with that specific thing, the better. And I think I would really like to get that in as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I think it's fairly telling, Lewis, if you don't mind me saying, that it was you that introduced this paper rather than officers. And I do feel that this is Cambridge City housing policy trying to be imposed across our geography. And the overriding thing that I want to say is that that just is never going to work. You've done a fantastic job in Cambridge City with your affordable housing programme, and I applaud you for it. And I applaud you for getting that money in the first place. You negotiated hard in the devolution deal, and well done to you for that. But that does not translate into providing a balanced approach that I need in East Cambridgeshire. And I'm always mindful of what MHCLG and the government are looking for from the Combined Authority to have a devolution deal and have a Combined Authority in the first place. And I don't think that that's well evidenced and supported at the moment in the principles. And I don't think it will necessarily make a persuasive case to MHCLG to support a future housing programme, because I can't yet see, as other people have said, the additionality that the Combined Authority is going to bring here at all. My overriding point that I want to make is that this has to be, it's up to each district area to work out what is right for its own housing provision and home housing mix. And you did say that nothing would be imposed, but the point of the Combined Authority is, to provide additionality and unlock opportunity, I think, is the main thing that I want to say. So some of the feedback has been taken on board. So it does now appear to provide for all tenures, which it didn't beforehand. And that is why I pointed to the fact about affordable home ownership. But the priority in there is still affordable rent products, and that's not necessarily right for every area. It's about having a balance and about having the right balance, and the districts are much better placed to understand what the needs are in their local communities than the Combined Authority. So, I don't like this imposition. On the homelessness agenda, yes, it's clearly a laudable aim, but I think there is much to be learned about how we approach homelessness. And East Cambs has worked incredibly hard on this agenda. 5-6 years ago, East Cambs was spending a very considerable percentage of its very small budget on bed and breakfast temporary accommodation, and we've eradicated that completely now for the last 6 years or more. We haven't spent any money in external bed and breakfast. And we've done it by a hyper prevention model, where we go out and support people very early on before they get into a mess. And it's a very holistic model where we support people with all their underlying issues very early on, so that they don't lose their accommodation, basically. And a prevention agenda would take the pressure off homelessness, and we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in, having to look at different opportunities for modular housing and all the rest of it, and strange site allocations for people, because they wouldn't be homeless in the first place. That's got to be the emphasis, and I think that should be, and I think we can share learning on that. My particular area of concern, you won't be surprised to hear in this paper, is around community land trusts. And I don't get the feeling from this principle that it is well understood how CLTs work, certainly not how they work in East Cambridgeshire, where they are absolutely community-led. And it's not that you get 100% support from a community to move ahead with a CLT planning application. Planning applications will always, or very often, of any size, will get people who don't want change in their village, in their community, and don't want to see housing coming forward, and NIMBYism because it's near their property or near their garden or whatever. But that doesn't mean that it's not community-led. And in East Cambridgeshire, this is absolutely about being community-led. It's bottom-up, it's not top-down. And this is not what the feeling I get from the CLT principle in the paper. The paper seems to suggest that the combined authority would be choosing locations and favouring rural and affordability issue locations. Well, that's not how community-led development works. And community CLTs are not the be-all and end-all. They're an important part of a balanced mix. And for East Cambridgeshire, they're a very important part, and they are our preferred mechanism of delivering affordable housing. They're not, they can take time to get going, but it puts the community in control, and in the end, the community extracts much greater benefit than other types of housing sites, and has a say in how they're delivered and the allocations policy, and is in control of that. But of course, they're not just about CLT sites, and not just about delivering affordable housing. Yes, it's a driving fundamental principle, it's the objective, but it's about delivering a balance of infrastructure, housing density, type of housing, locations, and other community benefits that the community wants to see. It's about the community driving that. It's not just all about affordable housing. There are choices to be made. I'm concerned that I get the feeling from this paper that the combined authority somehow thinks that it can choose and impose on community-led development, and that is not how it works. And I'm very concerned about the comment that says that existing CLT projects and commitments by the CEO will be reassessed against a new set of principles. Well, what does that mean for existing CLTs? That is not a good message. And in East Cambridgeshire, we've written to the mayor to just inform him that we are taking back our own resource in-house to support our existing community land trusts and our emerging community land trusts, of which there are many, and any future community land trusts, and to continue the work that we've been doing in East Cambridgeshire, because I need to make sure that is working for East Cambs, and I don't get the feeling that that is the case from this paper. And by the way, our most mature community-led development in Streatham is delivering affordable housing at way lower than social rent and market rent. I think the last level is under 60% of open market rent, with no rent increases since the tenants moved in, and even a rent holiday during COVID for people. And that's what you get. That's the benefit of community led development, where the community is in control. The principles are a bit more focused than when they first came to us. But in the end of all of this, it's about choices. There is only a certain amount of money to be bled from the increase in land prices, and we need to extract as much of that as we possibly can for our communities, and that's what this is all about. But at the end of the day, it's up to the communities and the districts to decide what's important to them. And some districts favour maximising the amount of affordable housing. Other districts want to balance that with the appropriate infrastructure. It's no good having very high percentages of affordable housing if you haven't got supporting infrastructure to go with it. And the asks from the combined authority around that are increasing daily. We need the supporting bus services. We need the supporting active travel options. We need all of that supporting infrastructure. We need net zero. All of that is very, very expensive, and it will only drive down the percentage of affordable housing contributions if we require all of that. So it has to be a balance, and putting any of these principles above the other and saying, I'm a bit confused about the net zero requirement, because it seems to suggest that no money from any future affordable housing programme of the combined authority will go towards sites that aren't delivering net zero. Well, that is going to strike out a huge amount of opportunity and a huge amount of lost opportunity. We have to move to net zero. Kennet Garden Village, which is community-led development, community land trust, is going to deliver nearest damn it to net zero. And it'll be 500 houses. So it's a very considerable ambition, and one that we will ensure happens. But that's not easy, and it's been done because there is better opportunity to extract more community benefit out of the site, because it's effectively a rural exception site. So this is about choices, and this can't all be about affordable housing. We want different tenure types. Those different tenure types come with different costs. People want low density sites. That's why community-led developments are often supported, because they are lower density, and that's what people want to see, particularly in the rural areas. We need supporting infrastructure, and we need carbon zero. So it can't all be about affordable housing, and I don't think that's well reflected in this paper at the moment. So I don't really understand why this is before this committee today, before coming to leaders briefing on Wednesday. So that's not the normal way of doing things. What will be the purpose of discussing it at leaders briefing if we've already discussed it and agreed it here? I can't agree with it in its current form. I think it needs a lot more work. And my main point that I want to make is I don't think this is persuasive yet. And I don't think it's clear what we're asking for from MHCLG for a future funding package. I don't know how far down the road we are, Lewis. You will know more about it as to where we are with asking MHCLG for our 22-25 programme. Have we made an ask? What does that look like? What discussions have we had? I don't know. So I'm afraid I can't support it in its current form, with particular problems around the CLT elements. But there isn't the right balance in there at the moment for me.
Thank you. Any other people want to make a contribution? Councillor Laws.
Just that I would actually say I agree wholeheartedly with what you've actually said. And I'd just like to add, I think it's up to each district and what is needed in their community. And probably, as people are aware in this room, the challenges in Fenland is the result of viability issues. The principal will cost more and therefore will place pressure on average grant rates and therefore lead to further viability challenges, which are a major headache in this district already. I therefore suggest exploring what can be done towards net zero as an ambition rather than absolute requirement to ensure the availability to maximise new affordable housing is not constrained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. If I just respond to some of the comments, and I think this is a point in time and not a strategy. I don't think the document will exist until there's a strategy. And in terms of why the railway timetables got mixed up and the leaders only get to discuss it in 2 days' time, I took the view that, and that was the point in sharing a document and getting input in the summer, that to inform a discussion with MHCLG, we needed to at least have some paint on the picture. I will respect whichever way you vote, but I do think it would help if we go into a discussion with MHCLG to have what I'd regard to be a fairly loosely framed set of principles, so that we are able at least to say we're on the way, albeit that, as I made clear, including to respond, Councillor Bailey, yes, I've had a discussion with senior civil servants. We haven't needed to at this stage meet the minister, but I do think, along with the mayor, that we will put a proposition into a letter to Luke Hall, and effectively, whether or not these principles are adopted, make our point about the fact that there's a lot of passion in this room about affordable housing. We are leaders, we are very busy people, but we have a real passion for this subject. We've got a different set of views. So we will discuss this further at a leaders meeting. I think that there's an element within the wording of the actual wording of the principles that allows considerable flexibility. We will develop a strategy one way or another. It should not take officer time, because their time is focused on immediately on the on actually firstly the next report, and then they'll be hardly able to answer the phone to us for the next couple of months, simply because there's an awful lot to be done. But I do want us to come back to this as a committee. It may be in November, I would hope, because that's our next meeting, but it may be later. And we do need to have an engagement with MHCLG. So one of the biggest points, which each of you has rightly made, and it's, I mean, you were right, Councillor Fuller, to say, why a combined authority? And partly, it's a little bit like treasure or funding in return for government seeing us actually work together and address and attack some of our challenges. We stand a better chance by working together, as we did back in 2016, of securing another dollop of funding. If we actually, with different views and different priorities, actually work together, it doesn't stop any council getting money out of Homes England or of having a dialogue themselves. But I do think, whilst our housing markets are really complicated, we've got completely different viability, as Councillor Lords would say, in this part of the county, that by working together, we've got a chance of having a funding base. Councillor Batchelor, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Fuller, others have said that we do need to have a much greater say by individual districts. And as long as I'm in this chair, there would be a composite bid, that there would be different elements. The housing markets themselves are so weird and different that we just have to start from some of that. So I hope you can support, or I'm not going to beg for an abstention, that would be a very weak political gesture, but I hope that we could get this adopted. If it isn't adopted, it won't change what I'm going to do a lot, in the sense that we have to continue to develop work. But there'll be no status to it unless it's adopted, and particularly there isn't really any status until we adopt a strategy. So my remark just now wasn't flippant. It was, but it sounded flippant, and I'm sorry for that. But I seek your support, but I respect what the vote will be. We will have as equal a dialogue through the leaders' strategy. There is a need to develop a proper strategy, and we are following through a number of the initiatives from the previous administration, because there was a lot of good in them and a lot of breadth in them. So I'm seeking now in the absence of any further contributions. Sorry, Councillor Bailey.
I just want to ask a question, clarification on something you just said. You mentioned that whether or not these are adopted today, you would be writing to MHCLG. Are you suggesting that you would continue to write to MHCLG based on these 8 affordable housing principles, even if the board doesn't adopt them?
Not at all.
No,
And
no,
I'm
okay,
sorry, I
thanks.
was a bit flippant, but we've got to talk to MHCLG about some of what we want to do. And I know the different views of districts, and the elements that are in here of affordable purchase approaches, of the very different housing markets, of affordable rent. And I don't believe that what I've got here is a composite of a Cambridge City view of the world. Obviously, some of the issues, like you mentioned about homelessness, are totally different in different patches. The needs and uses of community land trusts are different, rural, urban. The modular housing is. So I'm not suggesting in any form that, but I will be indicating some of the directions that I think that the combined authority will in the end follow. But they are, if you actually look at the wording of the principles, I don't think there's anything that is jarring, but the wording is still loose because there is not a lot of detail added. So aspects like, say, net zero, that's an aspiration. It isn't that suddenly all of the schemes on the council, the combined authority would only support those. But I see a role for both the mayor and myself in us getting a commitment from government. I mean, we've only at this stage, well, I think it's a big success to get £18.7 million. And that's still subject to further dialogue. And I'm sure MHCLG want further assurances. But that does, by implication, Councillor Bailey, say that £26.3 million of that original £45 million has not yet been decided. So I'm there, Councillor Bailey, to try and get as much funding for our area for affordable housing, and I will listen to what has been said. I'll now put the principles to the vote in the meeting. I will seek your support, and I will continue to listen, and we'll come back with a different version if it's turned down. Councillor Fuller.
Sorry, Chairman, just one last comment before you take the vote, because I think your assessment of this is actually somewhat different to the reality, because we as housing authorities, when you read the responses, we're actually largely saying the same things. So I don't think consensus on this is too hard to achieve. Yeah. So again, I have a huge amount of respect for you, Chairman, and your role in housing, but the approach you've just explained to this, of it almost being insurmountable to reach a stage where we can all agree, and therefore we're just going to have to get on and do some of this, I don't recognise it, because I think, largely we're all asking the same sort of questions in response to these principles. We're all making the same sorts of observations, and I think we can, regardless of the colour of the authority or the geography of the different authorities. I think there is a point at which we can all come together and agree some of these principles, and that, again, there's a bit of a theme today, but that again surely is the purpose of the combined authority. As you quite rightly said, in 2016, we all came together, we managed to agree and land this opportunity. But it's also becoming a theme of the new administration telling us that where agreement can't be reached immediately, we're going to override you and we're going to do things anyway. And I think we just need to move away from that, and we need to keep trying to find consensus if this experiment is going to work and if it's going to continue, because I think we can, Chairman. So I think a little bit more effort on discussing some of these principles, refining them, and actually we'll probably be able to bring something back we can all support.
Well, I look forward to those discussions and to any suggested improvements. So we do need to combine, and some of us in our roles are aiming to assist that combining. and to provide an outline, to get input, to say that this is not the final version, that there is going to be a further dialogue. And I recognise, just in the nature of the way that it wasn't possible to have a meeting of leaders in August, that was just not fitting because people were away. We were not going to be able to do that. But we do need to infer to our partners and work with improving what we've got. And we just need to have also, I need to continue to start to have dialogue assisted by the officers with MHCLG. I will not go anywhere into the zone that has not been approved by the Combined Authority or its Housing Committee. We will need to have the further discussions, and we'll take it from where we get to. There is no effort here, including in the way, Councillor Fuller, that the recommendations are worded to try and railroad or try and jump ahead. But I will respect what the decision is of the committee today. So I will move it forward and appreciate all the input, and also the sentiments, including that each of the districts in our geography is playing a major role on housing and working its socks off, along with your officers and also with the staff of the Combined Authority to get the best. So in terms of the proposition on page 25, I will move on block, or I will seek a proposer and maybe a seconder for the recommendations on page 25. Do I have a proposer?
Would you agree to take the first two separately to the third? Because personally, I'm quite comfortable to support the first two, but obviously have a different view as I've expressed on the third. But I wouldn't
So
want
do you
to
want
be
to take
voting
it in
against the
part?
principle that affordable housing is a priority for the Combined Authority, which you're going to force me to do if you take them on block.
So to be clear, and sorry, I should have brought my hearing aid today. Do you want to take the first two as a part and then the third as part? Yeah. Okay. So are you happy if I just move from the chair that we will take those recommendations in two parts? Okay. So first of all, then, can we take a vote on the first two recommendations? All those in favour? Thank you. And that's unanimous. And if I could then put the third recommendation to support the 8 principles within this report. All those in favour? 3, and all those against? And that's so the third part is not supported at this stage. And therefore we will take it to the leaders' meeting. And the route I would propose is that we obviously have a discussion there with the points that are made. And I would then, at that meeting on Wednesday, essentially be seeking people's comments, because I would seek to adopt a range of principles with your support, with the inputs from each of the representatives of the different councils. So if it's Councillor Bowden is there, or yourself, and each of us that's there on Wednesday. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the discussion. I recognise that the underlying commitment to affordable housing, and we will continue to work on those principles. We may not have 8, but we do need to have a group, and we need to then have a strategy. So thank you for the discussion. We'll now move to the immediate business and the work that has been led by Roger Thompson, and to which the officers have been putting in a huge amount of effort, and also incorporate in that, in item 3.2, an update on where we're at. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously some of this paper has now been superseded by the letter that we had on Friday. If I can maybe just dive in and explain to the committee what I believe that letter means that we received on Friday. So we had the letter from the Minister. In our previous discussions with MHCLG, we had a series of conditions that MHCLG were seeking for us to adhere to. They were listed under 2.2 in the report, and they've been reported previously. We believe the letter from the Minister is basically approving the top 18 schemes in Appendix 2. They are the 15 schemes that were previously approved by Housing Committee before June 2021. And then also the 3 schemes that were approved at committee at the June committee meeting. So we have a total of 18 schemes that we believe that money is effectively approving, and those schemes will deliver in excess of 1,100 units between now and starting at the end of March 2022, assuming that our delivery partners are still able to press their foot to the floor and get these schemes started on site within the requisite timescales. We're not aware of any change of the timescales from MHCLG. It's possible that there might be a change, but at the moment we're not aware of a change. So we're going to have to work to 31st March 2022. So that, I guess, is the good news. We've got green light to go and get on. My team is going to be incredibly busy, as the chair said, sorting out these 18 schemes and getting them moving and delivered. What we had also done with MHCLG, and we had asked them, was they had some concerns about the 5 schemes in the further proposed pipeline section, the bottom section of Appendix 2. We have not given up on those schemes. We intend to raise that again with MHCLG, which we flagged to them previously and asked that they would do so once we had this first decision. And we want to try and go into bat and get that money as well. Whether or not we'll be successful, we don't know, but that is something that we're still intended on doing. We made reference to that, I think, in section 210 in the report. So for much of the programme for 21-22, there's a green light, and I said we'll crack on. That has taken away some of the risks and issues, but also there's a specific situation in one of the schemes that is in Appendix 2 for our 21-22 programme, where we're having to make a variation to the level of the grant, a reduction in the level of the grant that was originally approved by Housing Committee in order for MHCLG to still support that scheme within the programme. And that is the scheme on the East Anglia galvanising works. Now, we've been in discussion with the applicants. They have confirmed that they're prepared to reduce their grant requirement to below the 45,000 threshold. And therefore, we're asking in the recommendations for the committee to note that change, that there's an intended reduction in that level of grant on that scheme. That is the only scheme that was affected by this notion of £45,000 cap. All the other schemes in a 21-22 programme were already below that level in terms of level of grant. So that's what we're looking for in terms of the approval to this paper. We've also given in the paper an update on the financial implications and the loan book performance. 4 of the 5 loans are going to plan. The houses are being delivered, construction's ongoing, some units are now completing, some units are even starting to sell, which is all great. The one scheme that has just slipped a little behind is the MOD site at Ely, and I've referred to that under section 3.5. The main issue with that is the disposal of the affordable housing units, which has been a little delayed. Hopefully, before we meet again, that will catch up with itself and we'll get that receipt in. And that will help to bring us back towards where we thought we were going to be with the cash flow on that loan. And there's also been just a slightly slower than projected sale of market units. And again, it's going to be down to the borrower to ensure they can try and catch up with that. The loan has to be paid by 31st March 2023. So we're not sitting on top of an immediate default or a concern. But I'm just flagging to the committee that that is the one scheme, as I'm doing most reports, where actually there's a deviation now, it seems, from where we thought we would be. And on that note, Chair, I'm happy to take as many questions as people have, but I think that's my initial summary.
Thank you, Roger. So it is good news that the MHCLG has approved the 18.7 million, but that is still well short of the full amount. And so in terms of the core, there is still a significant amount of work. And we would hope that MHCLG would recognise that we put this to them in July, and that then it's actually added to some of the challenges. So, I mean, we've got sympathy, whether it's Peterborough City or Cross Keys or the different providers. It hasn't been made any easier because of the need to get the shovels in the ground by the end of March to before the money can be paid over. And it doesn't stop there, because in addition to the existing programme of schemes that are underway and approved, this obviously puts quite a large amount of load. So outlined in that has been the principle that if there is issues with some of these schemes, that we have a pipeline, as Roger Thompson has mentioned, of alternative schemes that can fit it, which is part of the reason for the other proposals on this agenda, and the possibility that we'll bring forward a couple more in November. So we are, as Roger Thompson has said, committed to maximising how much money that we can secure, but we are under considerable challenge, but we have got an optimism about getting each of these projects delivered.
But just one thing to add, Chair, I should have mentioned, one of the other things, and it's connected to a later paper, so I think it's relevant. One of the things we have asked MHCLG to confirm, and hopefully we'll get this in the clarification, was an ability for us to be able to substitute schemes out of our 21-22 programme. So if there is a scheme or two that's going to drop away, and that's referred to one of the later papers that Asma's going to present, that we have the opportunity to replace those units with schemes that will start on site by March 2022. Now, we did ask the officers at MHCLG to try and ensure that we had that flexibility, and obviously we'll find that out, I would imagine, in the next few days, as to whether or not that is part of what they are agreeing to. Thank you.
So there's an element of detail that we need, and that which they will add to in what was, as you'll see from the letter shared, relatively short. And then there'll be a discussion with them, which we're also timetabled to have a meeting with the civil servants to elucidate and also to make some further points. So our objective remains to maximise how much affordable housing is started by within whatever envelope they set by March. Any questions or comments anybody wants to make? Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment really, and thank you for the update. You know, given all the frustrations we've had with MHCLG, which you're now clearly experiencing yourself, Councillor Herbert, about the time they take to come back, you know, and putting everything in jeopardy. Of course, this was the same frustration that we were experiencing previously, and you know, I note with some irony that if we were given the money now, we could still deliver 2,460 units within the what we all know was the original timescale of the 5-year programme, which took us to March 2022. And you know, that's well beyond the requirement that was made of us. So even given all of the problems that we've had with MHCLG, you know, we could still be on track to well over provide the amount of affordable housing from the original affordable housing programme. £100 million, 2,000 units, and we've still, after everything, got on the table 2,460 units potentially deliverable. So the argument about deliverability from MHCLG and not being on track was always nonsense. It remains nonsense. The only thing that's put a hole in the programme is the behaviour of MHCLG, frankly, and you know, fuelled by local political activity, I have to say. And the only other argument that they later put forward around value for money, well, I note again with some irony that the cap they've put is 45,000 when we were delivering at something like 36,000 per unit. So that was never an argument either. So I just think it's a huge frustration really in all of this heavy bureaucracy that we're having to wait for weeks on end for every scheme approval is just completely unnecessary and not what we're supposed to be about. And I think it's a matter of huge regret that the whole thing was politically hijacked.
Any other comments? I mean, I think I lived all of this like you did, Councillor Bailey, and I lived more of it. And it was painful being in opposition, and in fact, or it not being opposition, but scrutinising and challenging. But it was the case that we went off course, and whether we like it or not, Britain is run out of Whitehall and Westminster, and if you don't keep them happy, they'll kick you, and they've been kicking us for a long time. So I'm glad that we are. We understand better, and I take a point in that there was where I will agree with you was there was a complete fuzziness about exactly what it was that they wanted us to do differently at times, and it took quite a while. And if you, our officer team has not had an easy time for various reasons, but part of it is. In part, it's just the nature of the way this country blinking well works, and it doesn't work very well. And I do think that I do hope that in the work that we do and in the government's renewed commitment to devolution, that there will be more of that kind of sense of partnership, which is a frustration in your voice, but also I think we've just got to be warm-hearted towards them. And I know the civil servants felt that we were telling them to push off at times, and it don't work. They were the paymaster, and I would like us to continue the dialogue. And they've approved this, and in a relatively oblique summary letter. And being an optimist, I'll interpret that as an invitation to go back to them and continue the dialogue. But will we succeed? I can't say. But we definitely want that flexibility that Roger Thompson has talked about, as well as recognizing that there's a finite deadline, and talking to the many excellent providers that have been working with us and who also have had to be unduly patient, because we were not in a position to say, get the shovels moving. So we will work with yourselves, and we will work with the registered providers, and we will have that further dialogue. And we will discuss it also at the leader strategy meeting in terms of how we think that we can have a really strong engagement with MHCLG. And we won't get back to the last item until we've dealt with the current opportunity. Any further comments? Councillor Batchel.
Are we on the generality of the programme as well? Yeah. It's such a, could somebody explain the process to me, since it's such a rarity that anything from South Cambs would appear on this list? I see that 3 projects have recently got onto the list. Is it the process that some consultation actually goes on with the district council, since we've had no advice from the applicants or the combined authority on these?
Yes, I think the question is about Appendix 3, which is the pipeline of schemes that we've got looking ahead, and actually that might start to form some of the basis of future discussions with the MHCLG beyond what we're asking for 21-22. There is a process, so my team does communicate and has communicated with your team, making the ask, and you've asked all the district councils of what are you aware of, what have you got in the pipeline that we can add to our future programme. So we have consulted with your team and all the other leaders' teams, and you can sort of see from the schedule the responses that we've had. Rather ironically, I mean, we might want to take this offline, but we actually only had 1 response from your council, which was the 4 units referred to at Meadowcroft Way. The other 2 schemes are schemes that we're aware of as on a sort of wider level as combined authority officers. So we would very much welcome a more detailed dialogue with your officers to identify the other opportunities, because we've asked the initial question and to be frank, we got very little back.
Right, the ones I was querying were Camborne West and Papworth, which does not come from the district council. Presumably it's just coming from the developer.
Yeah, that would come from our other sort of developer, registered providers, developers, our other contacts in the market. Yeah.
So someone is going to have a discussion with the officers of South Cambs.
Yes, absolutely. So those will be sort of in reverse, where we're aware of stuff in your area that your officers didn't raise with us. So we'll be at some point, if we look like we're going to get some traction with the program beyond March 22, we'll take that back to your officer team. But what we're really looking for is this collaboration. And so for some of our councils, it's excellent, I have to say. We get a lot of really good cross information and communication going, and others it is slightly less so.
Thanks, Councillor Batchelor. So we haven't added a further recommendation, but clearly it is an endorsement that we've got the money to get going, however we characterise it. And you'll see from the schedule on page 69 that there are a very large number of projects. And so I do thank the officers for all of the work that they've put in. We do need to have a lot of dialogue now over the next couple of weeks. We need to know in detail that these projects are going to get delivered. We do have something of a list of further options, but it's not a long list. And we may bring some further reports to the next meeting. So so there is more behind this than the relatively short recommendations. And I will update the committee when we have a dialogue with MHCLG, because there may be more to the story. We've got the further reports to come. So do I have a proposer for the two recommendations on the paper? Councillor Fuller, thank you. And a seconder from Councillor Laws. So I'm seeking the committee support for A and B on recommendation 3.2. All those in favour? Thank you, and thank you. That was unanimous. So if we can then move on to...
Sorry, can I just, one observation? Sorry to go back. Heat and Dry seems to be on the spreadsheet twice in East Cambs. Just
so is this on page 69?
On page 73.
73.
Just seems to, sorry, just check it.
Okay, thanks. So as that indicates, there's a large number of schemes, and thank you for your attention to detail. So so we've got a lot of projects there. So we've now got three proposed schemes, items 3, 3, 1, 2, and 3. So there's attached to this, and then we immediately go into the scheme with the Halo scheme, SN Developments, and Larkfleet. Appendix 1 to reports, Appendix 1 to the reports for each of these two items, 331 and 333 on the agenda, are exempt from publication because they contain information relating to the financial or business affairs of a particular person, including authority holding that information under paragraph 3, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. So what I'm asking here is, if members do wish to, and you're perfectly free to, discuss the content of any of the exempt appendices, we would need to go into a confidential session. So if you do, should you wish to do that, if you could just use actually indicate to me and just stick your hand up. But I will seek to discuss this in the open agenda, because I think it's good to be transparent. So if you could then just indicate, we can go into confidential. But assuming that we can work on the printed paper, I'm going to invite Asma Ahmad Pierce to introduce this report 3.31. So if you can sit there, I think we've been left by the excellent IT team to try and manage ourselves. So yeah, if you could sit at that seat and then check Asma that the buttons and everything work. Right hand button. And apologies, Councillor Bailey and I think Roger, that we've got feedback selectively on some people's speakers, but that's life. So, Asma, you can take your time.
So can everybody hear me? Fantastic. Wasn't sure that was going to work, but there we go. Right. Good morning. And I am going to introduce the first of 3 sites coming through for Housing Committee. The first one's Halo. There's 2 potential sites being developed, one with Larkfleet and one with SN Developments. SN Developments are developing 11 properties in East Cambs, and Larkfleet are developing 16 in the Fens and Peterborough City Council. All these units are shared ownership units. The total grant that is required is 1,209,000. This is being brought forward subject to confirmation from M8CLG as a possible substitute for a site if there is a non-progressing project, which we have one which seems likely. SN Developments are due to start on site this month. Larkfleet are already on site. The average grant rate for all of these units is 44.7k. All 3 LAs have been contacted and happy for the additionality of these units. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. Any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Bailey.
I support the one that I particularly know about in these camps. Just a very small thing. It would be nice if the names of the authorities could be correct in the report. I don't know if somebody vets these, but Peterborough District Council and Fenlands District Council are not really the names of our authorities. It's
Sorry, I did say Peterborough City Council. I did correct myself.
Yeah, it's in the report. That's all.
Beg your
I'm
pardon.
surprised it didn't get
Slight error.
proofread somewhere in the process. It's only a small thing. Sorry to be pedantic, but I do. It does matter. We are.
Okay. Take the point.
Yeah.
There's a.
And also just another very minor thing. It would be helpful just to save having to really delve for it in exempt appendices and everything. If the sites could be listed in these papers, so it didn't actually say anywhere that the site had them where it is, and I had to go delving looking for it. It'd just be helpful if they could say where they are, so you know. Yeah, thanks. So, sorry, small things.
Appreciate that we're interested in those in our patch. Any questions or comments? Well, I will take that as either fiercely in favour or not in favour, and I will seek a proposer for approving the £1.2 million funding. Anybody willing to propose? Councillor Laws and Councillor Nethsinger, I'll take as a seconder. So I'll put the recommendation on page 75 of 1.2 million funding for 27 affordable homes. And it would be good if we could, in the way that we report it, Tamar, just to record which units are in which districts in the recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. And that is unanimous. Thank you. So if we can, are you doing the next one too? Okay, Lucky Asma will now introduce 3.3.2 on page 81.
Right, this is Bayard Plaza in Peterborough with Rent Plus. These are 40 units, which are affordable flats, and they'll be through the Rent Plus product. Brightfield Housing Group are the ones are developing out Bayard Plaza. It is almost finished and it's a permitted development. Some of the properties are being purchased previously in another report that I did with Halo, and they're all shared ownership. The units that Rent Plus have got are 1 and 2 beds. Some of the 2 beds are marginally bigger. The units are near completion. The grant they're asking is 1,800,000. I've been in contact with Peterborough City Council regarding the units because it's a rent to buy product. They're looking at having a small condition, having a nominations agreement and allowing people off the housing register who are low income families and have an average income of 31,600 to have the option of applying for these units through their CBL. The average grant rate is 45k, and based on MHCLG supporting and approving the Rent Plus delivery model, I'm bringing this forward today.
Okay, so there's a specific bit of wording there because there's a discussion with MHCLG whether they take what their view is. Homes England support Rent Plus, and there is quite a lot there, but there are different views, and I expect that there are different views in the committee about Rent Plus. But the proposal is that we've got this, and I think Roger mentioned to me as an aside that there is only one other Rent Plus scheme within our programme to date, but this is an addition. Sorry, did I cut you off there? No. Any questions or comments? Councillor Batchelor.
Just on the question of the Rent Plus model, we had one in my own area which didn't go forward because of various reasons that I won't go into here. But my understanding is that the government isn't very keen on this particular model of rent to buy and so on. I mean, have we any knowledge of what the view of the government is on this?
Thank you. Roger.
Well, as we said, we had some of that feedback from MHCLG as well with our proposed 21-22 programme, which this scheme is a part. This is one of the 5 schemes that we're looking to revisit with MHCLG to have that discussion. Rent Plus have provided quite a lot of collateral information that suggests that there are previous housing ministers and officers in MHCLG who have been supportive of their proposition. So we just want to go and have that sensible discussion with them and work out if the Rent Plus proposition is something through that discussion that they can support, in which case we can get these schemes into our programme this year. And equally, if not, then okay, well, we've tried and we understand what the issues are, and clearly we won't be bringing Rent Plus back in any future programme if they do, are adamant that they do not like the model. But we would like to try and support the model, I believe, if we can.
So we're aware that there are different views, and different districts take different views in terms of prioritising scarce funding. The Homes England are supporting schemes. The housing's uniquely complicated, not uniquely maybe, but it is very complicated. And I'm open-minded, but generally, as people might infer from reading the early report, I've got views, or we've got perspectives. That what really attracts me to Rent Plus, albeit that there are other ways of spending money, is that it gives the opportunity of people, say if someone takes a product of one of these shared ownership at 30, at 35, 40, 45, 50, they've got a window of opportunity to actually alter the way that they work their personal finances. And for me, that's a really valuable variation. And it's not, the world's not perfect, but often in the way that we provide affordable housing, you provide it at that one point, and then there isn't that flexibility. So to me, that, including for this Bayard Plaza scheme, just gives the people that move into it quite a lot of ability just to alter. And we are often in housing that we decide that we want in a point in time, maybe in 91 or 97, and we're there for a long time. And a lot of people are not in the kind of housing that's suitable for them. financially or location. So that's why I think it's worth us sticking up for flexibility, really. Roger? Any other comments? Councillor Nessing.
Just a very brief comment. I am in no way an expert on housing. I'm becoming more expert, but I agree that I think Rent Plus is definitely something that we should be looking at. And one of the reasons why I'm very supportive of this is that it is a genuinely secure, affordable housing for people who are not able to provide a deposit. I also know that many of the shared housing schemes that we're looking at, shared ownership schemes, end up not being very affordable. I've known an awful lot of young people who simply can't afford to get anywhere close to shared ownership. And I think this provides a realistic alternative for many of those people. So I'm glad we're looking at it, and I hope it will be supported. Thank you.
Do I have a proposer? Councillor Nessinger, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Fuller, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Councillor Batcher's recorded as an abstention. Thank you for that. And Asma, part 3, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to interject, councillor, that Rent Plus is obviously renting first at an affordable rate and saving up for a deposit. So it's genuinely affordable and looks at people's lifestyles and circumstances. Right, Yorkshire Building Society, Lynchwood, Peterborough, again with Rent Plus, again also working with Brightfield Housing Group, which are refurbing the site. It's an old office building which has been recently vacated. It will be providing 96 1- and 2-bed flats. It will be through a rent to buy product again, so people can have 5, 10, 15 years tenancy agreement, secure affordable rents, and will be working along the same lines as Bayard Plaza. The grant requirement is 4,320,000. As part of the site, there's a big space at the back, which was a car park, which we were considered bringing forward, but decided to use that as to build on later and wouldn't be in this affordable housing programme. It will follow the same lines as income and eligibility by employment of 31,600. The average grant rate is 45k, and I'm bringing this today to the committee based on MHC's LG approving the Rent Plus delivery model. Thank you.
Thank you. So part of the discussion that we will have with MHCLG will be specifically on the Rent Plus being additional to the 18.7 million, and therefore be asking for further funding. Any questions or comments on the Yorkshire Building Society Lynchwood project? I will assume that you're either in favour or viciously against, and I will seek a proposer, Councillor Nessinger, and a seconder. Councillor Fuller again, thank you. All those in favour of the proposal for 4.3 million for 96 affordable homes? And those against? And abstention, Councillor Batchelor. Thank you for all your contributions, and thank you also for Fenland hosting us. I'm hoping that whoever hosts us next time might be able to make a cup of tea for us, but it may not be possible. People have travelled a fair distance, so thank you for coming over. It is important that we meet and talk. So the next meeting is on the 3rd of November, and the venue will be advised. We will update members of the committee on further detail that we hope to obtain. We are determined to deliver as much housing within the 45k limit, and in other schemes that have been approved. We will continue to discuss housing strategy on Wednesday with the leaders, and I look forward to seeing the leaders then and you all on the 3rd of November. I declare this meeting closed.